Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. Today is Sunday evening. I've been having a very chilled out weekend. I've seen my family, feeling mellow. Mellow is good. I have obviously had a haircut. As you can see, my hair is gone. I've been growing out the natural colour for quite a long time because the coloured portion is a little bit unhealthy, so that was the plan. Anyway, you're probably not here for my hair. So I actually thought I would do something different today. I know I floated this idea around a little bit on the community tab. I've also talked about it briefly in some videos, and I just thought plants and the plant hobby slash obsession slash whatever you want to call it, it's only one facet of me as a human being, and I don't want to limit myself in terms of what I talk about, because I think I will just get fed up and bored of doing plants all the time, and I don't want to make YouTube my sole enjoyment of plants. I want to enjoy my plants for me too. So in the interest of balance, I'm doing something slightly different today. If you know me in real life, or we've spoken a lot online or whatever, you may know that I am a very avid bookworm. I do love books. I am absolutely obsessed with books. I would say almost as much as plants, if not more. I mean, books have been my obsession since I was very, very young. And I used to stay up till sort of 3 a.m. as a sort of 7 or 8 year old, unbeknownst to my mother, reading books because I just couldn't get enough of them. It's been a long-standing hobby slash obsession of mine, and I, in the last year, have come across the most amazing thing. So any of you who like to track your book reading progress on things like Goodreads, you may not know that Goodreads is owned by Amazon, and Amazon is the devil, as we all know, although I do reference it quite a lot, still use it quite a lot. But in any way that I can encourage myself and other people not to use Amazon, I will. So Goodreads was set up by two book readers slash hobbyists many years ago, but it was eventually bought out by Amazon. So I came across the StoryGraph, which is an independently owned app and a way of recording your book reading across time. So I've got my laptop here, so hopefully you can see. I know it's not going to be easy to see on here, but basically I have the most amazing amount of stats about all my book reading. And obviously, you know, I can't do forever because I can't remember what books I've read, but I've got kind of all the way back to 2016, 2015, I think. But yeah, I've got an amazing amount of statistics all about it. So it's got moods, it's got pacing, it's got page numbers, fiction versus non-fiction. The pink is the fiction, so quite clearly I've spent a lot of time on fiction in my life. And genres we've got here as well. The top line is literary fiction, which I will admit is my favourite, and there's a bit of everything else. We've got formats, so most of what I read is in print, but we have a little bit of audio there, and we've got the trends for how much I've read over the years, which is really cool. So you can see 2016 was a bit of a peak year here, and then it's kind of crept back up from 2020 onwards, and now we're obviously partway through 2022, so it's dropped down again. And we have our star ratings, and this is just what I wanted to share today because I thought it might be quite interesting for you to get to know me and my reading style, what I like about books and what kind of books I like, to go through my 5-star reads. So since I'm gonna only go back as far as 2017, because otherwise it might take forever in a day, and also I feel like I've grown and changed a little as a person, beyond 5 years ago. So I've got 23 books to run through. So I thought I would give you a rundown of all of my 5-star books, and I'll just give you a little synopsis. I have most of them on a pile next to me, which is kind of balanced very precariously, so we'll go through those. There are a couple that are either audiobooks or I don't have the book anymore because I've lent them out. So in that case, I will put a little image of the book up here, and or the audiobook, so that you have a visual for what the book is. So I don't think I'm going through this on my laptop, so if you see me looking downwards, I don't think these are put in any kind of order, so but maybe that's a nice thing. So we're just going to go through in a mishmash order. So I will grab my first one. If I was a sensible organised person, I probably would have organised this list in the same order before we got started. But anyway, this one is quite a nice one to start with because it is in keeping with the theme of my channel thus far. So this is Secrets of a Devon Wood by Jo Brown, which is a nature journal. So Jo Brown is an illustrator, and she has essentially published her illustrated nature journal from her random forays in the woodland near her home and also in her garden. So basically the entire book is just illustrations and little factoids about the wildlife that she has made illustrations about. So we've got a lot of birds, we've got little insects, we've got fungi, we've got various plants, flowers, all of that sort of thing. So there's a lot in this book, and why this is a 5-star read for me is it's a really lovely book to dip in and out of. It's very easygoing. It's a great coffee table read. It's also really, really nice for just like a wind down before bed, because you can just kind of immerse yourself in a little bit of nature, a little bit of peacefulness, and it's just a soothing book. It's not too intense. I find, for me, fiction work can be quite brain intensive, so if I'm trying to get into something or trying to understand it a bit better, I like things in this format where you've got really brief, snappy information, like orange peel fungus, Alluria aurantia, Latin for orange. As the name suggests, the mature form of this Ascomycete, should have chosen something easier to read, fungus looks just like discarded orange peel on the ground. And that's kind of the information, and for me that is really nice, short and sweet, snappy, love it. And the other thing that I really like about this book is the dust jacket, not the dust jacket, the binding. It's just really, really beautiful. So it's also a book that I like to keep on display in my kind of plant bookcase, because I just think it's beautiful. The next book is a read from the beginning of this year. So this is Bryony Gordon, Glorious Rock Bottom, and this is a book about alcoholism, but also some substance abuse, including drug addiction. Now, I read this at the beginning of the year because I felt like my relationship with alcohol had become a little bit of a problem, just a bit too much. I think I've touched on this in a previous video. Not that I couldn't put down the drink, it's just that it had become a bit too much of a regular habit to have a drink in the evening. And I felt like I wanted to kind of explore what it might look like not to drink alcohol, and, you know, question whether it was actually a problem or not. And this has been a really helpful book in that process. So Bryony Gordon is a journalist in the UK. I think she writes for the Times or the Telegraph, I can't remember, but I think various different publications. But she's basically had an alcohol addiction for about 20 years, although she wasn't necessarily aware of the fact that it was an addiction for a lot of that time. And she has a very raw and honest narrative in this book. She goes through the very shocking rock bottom depths of what she's gone through and what it took to kind of save her life ultimately by giving up alcohol. And this was a really truly eye-opening read for me, and really made me reflect on my relationship with alcohol. Just by the way, I'm in a better place with alcohol now. I've you know, put some rules in place for myself, which makes things a lot easier. But this was a great part of facing that head on, rather than kind of burying my head in the sand and telling myself there's nothing that I need to consider. Because I think, you know, with any substance, it's very easy to go off the rails if you don't pay attention to it. Obviously not talking about people who have necessarily addiction problems. Next book. This is my book club read for this month, although I read this a year ago and I absolutely loved it. So this is On Earth We Are Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong, who is a Vietnamese American poet. And this, I'll just read the blurb out quickly. This is a letter from a son to a mother who cannot read, written when the speaker, Little Dog, is in his late 20s. The letter unearths the family's history that began before he was born. It tells of Vietnam, of the lasting impact of war, and of his family's struggle to forge a new future, and it serves as a doorway into parts of Little Dog's life his mother has never known. Episodes of bewilderment, fear, and passion, all while moving closer to an unforgettable revelation. This book is as beautiful as its cover. Funny story, I actually bought this book twice by mistake, not realizing I'd already bought it, just because I was so drawn to the cover. I can't say much about this without kind of giving away a lot of spoilers, but it's kind of autobiographical. It's written in a very poetic style and kind of almost like a stream of consciousness, but still with a really beautiful storytelling element, and I would highly recommend this book. And I'm really hoping that my book club likes it too, because I will be heartbroken if there's anyone in there who doesn't enjoy it. The next one, we are jumping around the timeline here. I read this in lockdown. This is The Guest Cat by Takashi Hiradi. I hope that's how you say it. Hiradi? I don't know. This is a translated book from Japanese, and it's about a couple who don't have any children, living in their 30s in a rented cottage in Tokyo. They both work from home as freelance writers, and their relationship has kind of got to almost like a bit of a stale place. And this book is so beautiful. It's just a very mundane almost story, but written very simplistically but very beautifully. A cat invites its way into their home, and their relationship starts to kind of focus and center around this cat, and the cat brings them connection and joy, I think I want to say, and it's just really beautiful. If you enjoy translated Japanese fiction, you'll probably love this. And I don't have a huge amount more to say about this, but it's definitely a favourite of mine. Really love this. Next we have Frankenstein. So Frankenstein, I obviously live in Bournemouth. I'm sure you all know this by now. And Mary Shelley is actually buried in Bournemouth. So I felt it was around about time, middle of last year, that I needed to actually read Frankenstein, having never done so. And this story, heavy going. It's emotional, it's beautiful, it's heartbreaking, it's kind of freaking weird. And I mean, I'm sure most people are familiar with the story of Frankenstein. And I think what I didn't realize is how much it follows the narrative of Frankenstein's monster, rather than just Frankenstein himself. Frankenstein, who is the scientist / alchemist, and Frankenstein's monster being the monster that we commonly refer to as Frankenstein. I absolutely loved this, and I also felt incredibly depressed while I read it, and there was so much that I was reading and thinking, this is just how I feel quite often, in terms of the bleakness that Frankenstein's monster was experiencing. And I found that really interesting that this was written in 1818 and the experience is the same. I felt really deeply sorry for Frankenstein's monster, and at the same time kind of horrified. And I just thought it was a really beautiful book. So definitely really pleased to have read that at last. This next one, This was a hard read. Oh, it's upside down. This is The North Water by Ian McGuire. This was shortlisted or longlisted, I can't remember, for the Man Booker Prize in 2017, I believe. It might be 2016, I can't quite remember. This book was hard, heavy going. It is essentially it's a story written on a boat called the Volunteer, a ship I should say, bound for the hunting waters of the Arctic Circle. So this was I believe Victorian era, in the peak of kind of whale hunting times, and it's absolutely brutal. I think the only way I can I can summarize this is by reading the blurb. So, behold the man, stinking, drunk, brutal and bloodthirsty. Henry Drax is a harpooner on the Volunteer, a Yorkshire whaling ship bound for the hunting waters of the Arctic Circle. Also aboard for the first time is Patrick Sumner, an ex-army surgeon with a shattered reputation, no money and no better option than to embark as ship's medic on this ill-fated voyage. In India, during the siege of Delhi, Sumner thought he had experienced the depths to which a man can stoop and imagined he'd find temporary respite on the Volunteer. But now, trapped in the wooden belly of the ship with Drax, he encounters pure evil and is forced to act. As the true purposes of the expedition become clear, the confrontation between two men plays out amid the freezing darkness of an Arctic winter. So, if ever a trigger warning was needed for a book, this is one of them. I would be very careful about reading this book if you are somebody who can get triggered by fiction books. The nice thing about the StoryGraph is that you can look up any trigger warnings that previous readers have flagged on these, so I would highly recommend doing that. It goes into abuse, and it's gory, bloodthirsty, sickening. There's a lot about whaling. It's graphic descriptions of the whales and animal carcasses, all sorts of things. It's a heavy read, and as much as it was kind of almost appalling to read, this book has kind of stayed with me all these years. It's been nearly 5 years since I read it, and 4 years, and it still pops up in my mind. And I mean, if that's not incredible writing, I don't know what is. But yeah, could be a traumatizing read, so be careful. Proceed with care with this one, but without a doubt, probably one of the best books I've read in terms of world building, visceral feelings, everything. Just wow, really incredible, gripping book. But yeah, proceed with caution. Next book is actually a self-help book. So this is Buy Yourself the Fucking Lilies by Tara Schuster. This is Buy Yourself the Fucking Lilies and Other Rituals to Fix Your Life from someone who's been there. And this is it starts off corny as hell. But actually I listened to this on audiobook rather than read the book, and I subsequently bought the book to make notes from. And actually, although it felt really corny to begin with, it became like almost a ritualistic Bible of how to help myself for quite a while. I was listening to this while I was commuting, and actually I just really liked the perspective of this book that was kind of loving but also gently poking at wounds and talking about how she had been in these situations and how that might reflect in your life and things you can do to honor yourself and that kind of thing. And although it started off feeling kind of corny, it felt actually really genuine and really heartwarming towards the middle. The end is a bit take it or leave it. It really has to hit you at the right time in your life. It's all about being in the wrong relationships with the wrong men. So if you're not in a relationship with a man, might not be helpful. If you're not in a toxic relationship with someone, it also might not also be helpful. So take with a pinch of salt. It is quite cisgendered and quite heteronormative. So I actually don't know what my demographic is like, so just be aware while you're if you are interested in reading this book. But really, really good, really loved it, and would well, I will come back to it in the future. Right, next is The Kite Runner by Khaled Hosseini. So this is kind of a cult classic at this point. There was a lot of peer students of mine in school who read this, around about my age group anyway, who read this as part of school, and it's very brutal. I mean, I think it's a really important read, but it's very brutal. Again, this is one that you need to be aware of your trigger warnings for. Again, I would definitely recommend looking up the trigger warnings for this book before you read it, if you might be sensitive to the topics in here. But basically it's set in Afghanistan, 1975, and 12-year-old Amir is desperate to win the local kite fighting tournament, and his loyal friend Hassan promises to help him, but neither of the boys can foresee what will happen to Hassan that afternoon, an event that is to shatter their lives. Amir and his family go to America, and Hassan stays in Afghanistan under the Taliban rule, and he returns to Afghanistan later in life. And this is a really important book, hard to read, honestly, but I think something that everyone should probably read at some point in their life. Although, if you don't, I've got another one. It's the next one on the list. If this might be too triggering for you, I've got one again that might be triggering in different ways, but something to balance out the different types of triggers, if you will. This is my next 5-star read, which is A Fort of Nine Towers by Qais Akbar Omar. So this is I believe, yes, true life memoir of the author growing up in Afghanistan. And the war in Kabul began when he was 11. And this is a really it's an intense book. It's incredible. It really gives you a view into the lives of the people of Afghanistan who have been affected by a war that has been of our times. And I think it's really, really interesting to read about this as it still affects the world today. And I remember when I read this, I cried and I cried and I cried, and I just felt hope and hopelessness simultaneously. I felt a deep sadness and yet a real love and tenderness for the human spirit, and I just absolutely love this book. I feel like it's just I never see anyone ever talk about it. I picked it up purely by chance in Waterstones years ago, and I just think it's beautiful, and I think we should all read books like this that affect our times, and personal stories about the things that we are, I suppose, ultimately complicit in as human beings. Next, we have Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse, another cult classic. So Siddhartha is a story of a young Brahmin man in India who goes on a journey of self-actualization. He's been born into this life that he doesn't feel is right for him, so he decides to abandon his family and set out to find his true self. And it's a story of temptation and heartbreak and a true kind of coming of, I don't want to say coming of age because that's not quite right, but coming of spiritual awakening, I suppose. It is, yeah, it's a spiritual awakening. And I don't know if I read this and it hit me at the right point in my life, but it just really, really touched me. And it's a short read, and I just felt it was beautiful, beautiful writing. Interestingly, written by Hermann Hesse, who's a German man, about an Indian story. So that's weird, but obviously he did it really well. Next we have The Underground Railroad by Colson Whitehead. So this is a story written in the times of slavery. So it's written from the setting of a cotton plantation in Georgia, where the protagonist escapes, and we see a lot of what happens to her peers, the risks she's taken by escaping with somebody else, what she goes through in America even after she's escaped, all kinds of things. It is terrifying, heartbreaking, amazing, and just, I mean, a little bit silly as well, because it runs with the theme of the Underground Railroad being a true, real thing, and a literally physically underground railroad, where actually in reality it was supposedly a smuggling arrangement in America. But fascinating story premise and really, really well written. I absolutely love this book, and definitely 5-star read for me. Next we have an audiobook that I read. So this is Going to Hurt, Secret Diaries of a Junior Doctor by Adam Kay. Really bloody funny, I'm not going to lie to you. I mean, I think we all in the UK have probably seen enough of this book at this point, because I think it just kind of blew up, and I think he's now working as a comedian, but I mean, it is very funny, and emotional and true, and just makes you think about the reality of the state of the NHS, and maybe what we're not doing enough of, and maybe what we're doing too much of as individuals, as well as a collective, and how our government is failing the NHS and that kind of thing. I listened to this in the car while I was commuting again, and there were so many times where I went, I just laughed out loud, and it's brilliant. It's a brilliant book. It's not very long. I think it's 5 hours or maybe 6 hours on audiobook, but absolutely brilliant. The next book I have is an unusual one for me. Bad Feminist by Roxane Gay, which is again an audiobook for me. This is a very long collection of essays about lots and lots of different things, but mainly sort of around the theme of feminism. And there was a lot that I agreed with, a lot that I didn't agree with, but I felt that even the things that I didn't agree with that Roxane Gay wrote, I just felt they turned around in my mind for days and days afterwards. Every single essay. I did make the mistake of trying to kind of chew through this all at once, and I think maybe I should have read each essay and allowed that to kind of stew, rather than listening to each essay back to back. But really, really amazing book. Definitely recommend, especially if you're the type of person who is female, feels that you align to a lot of the feminist ideals, but also have a bit of resistance to it, because there are some kind of, I don't know, negative narratives around being a feminist in this modern age, much as there are negative narratives about being vegan, having religion. I don't know, I'm not going to get into it. The next one I have the physical copy of, but I actually read it as an audiobook. This is Milkman by Anna Burns. So this was it was the winner of the Man Booker Prize in 2018. So this is written in an unnamed city, but it's implied that it's either in Northern Ireland or Ireland. We never really know which side is which, but basically it follows an 18-year-old girl who's kind of attracted the wrong attention, and tries so desperately to be uninteresting that she becomes interesting and attracts all kinds of negative attention. It's a really, I mean, the story itself follows about 5 days or maybe even just a weekend, I can't remember, but it's a very long and I won't say rambling's not quite the right word, because it is very interesting rambling, but it is long and rambling. I mean, every point or event that happens in the book, the author or the narrator kind of chews over like so much information, and I think it can be quite overwhelming. That actually I found a lot of it felt really profound, and I had to go back and listen over and over and over again to kind of get the concepts in my head. I think it also taught me a lot about what was going on in Ireland. It's the troubles of Ireland. We're not taught about in school. Maybe we should be, I think. But I found this really beautifully interesting. I loved the narration. I thought it was fascinating the way everything was done. I loved this book, but I can understand it might not be for everyone. But you might want a less rambly review, in which case, go online. The next one is a very simple one. You probably will have seen this if you're living in the UK. So this is The Boy, the Mole, the Fox and the Horse by Charlie Mackesy. And it is... Excuse me. Thank you, Lucy. I don't know if you hear that. She meows every time I sneeze. So it's almost like a little self-help book. I think it might have been a children's story, but it's very much an adult story to me. But it follows it's kind of four characters: the boy, the mole, the fox, and the horse. And the boy is kind of asking life's questions, and the creatures around him are giving answers in a gentle and kind way. And I actually think this is a really soulful meditation on what it means to be compassionate. So there's one here where it says, "Sometimes I feel lost," said the boy. "And me too," said the mole, "but we love you and love brings you home." And again, it's not going to be for everyone, but for me, I love this. I dip in and out of it, and it really helps me to reflect on how to be compassionate to myself as much as anything else. And yeah, I think it's a lovely gift for anyone that you care about as well. I think it's really, really, really lovely. Right, next we've got Susanna Clarke, Piranesi. This I bloody loved. This is kind of new to me. I think I hadn't realised before this book that I really, really like magical realism, and I kind of have been a bit of a snob about it in the past, and just been like, oh, it's not real though. So, but this is about Piranesi is a man who lives in the house. The house is kind of more like a building full of rooms and corridors, and we never really truly get an explanation for what the house is meant to symbolise. On Tuesdays and Fridays, Piranesi sees his friend, the Other, and at other times he brings tributes of food and water lilies to the dead, but mostly he's alone. So he writes journal entries throughout the time that he's alone in the house. He seems to have no concept of why he's here, how he got here. He knows that he's of a certain age and that he hasn't always been here, but he has no memory of a life outside of here. And it is bloody fantastic. I flipping love this book. It is winner of the Women's Prize for Fiction last year, and I just got so lost in it, and I just love it, and I wish that I could go back and read this again for the first ever time, because the joy that I got from this book was just on top of the world. Didn't drop that. Another little cult classic, we have The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. So it follows Santiago, who's a young shepherd boy. He is in search of something more to life, and he follows his heart and goes into unknown lands, and he comes across alchemy and philosophical questions, and there's advice sort of snippets through the book. And I think if you let go of the fact that it's so simplistic and you ignore the hype around it, then it is a really simple, beautiful meditation on what it means to be alive and what it means to enjoy life, and I think the real unfortunate downside of this book is that it has been so overhyped as like the most amazing spiritual awakening you'll ever have. And you kind of read it and you go, okay, I don't think so. But if you kind of can get past that and just see it as a book, forget the hype, forget anything about it, and just enjoy it as a light meditative read, I think it's a really beautiful book. My coffee's going cold. Must hurry up. Right, we have... I'm worried I'm going to run out of space on my phone. We've got Transcendent Kingdom by Yagyazi, a beautiful book about a woman in STEM called Science, Technology, Engineering and Mathematics, I think STEM stands for. She's called Gifty, and she lost her brother when she was quite young, and she has a mother who struggles deeply with depression, and at the same time she has a lot of underlying mental health issues and traumas that are really unresolved, and she goes through life not really understanding herself, and we start to see a bit of her understanding more about herself and her mother and her brother through this book. And it's just the way that this is written is just gorgeous. I highly recommend this book. And again, it was shortlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction last year, and if Piranesi hadn't won, this one was it. This one was going to be the one. Definitely highly recommend. The next one we've got is Shantaram by Gregory David Roberts. Oh my god, my favourite book on planet Earth, and this has been my favourite book ever since I read it. It is long. It is something like 920 pages, just over. But basically the author is kind of semi-autobiographical, although he claims that it's not. It's kind of based on some baseline framework of truth, although his life story is actually very much similar. But basically it's set in the 80s. Lynn, who is the protagonist in this book, escapes from an Australian prison and escapes across to Bombay. Obviously Mumbai as we now know it, but at the time it was Bombay, and he goes to live in a Bombay slum. He meets some wonderful people in the slum. He becomes a slum doctor. He also somehow ends up being part of the Bombay Mafia. He goes to a prison. I mean, this is all in the blurb, so I'm not spoiling anything. He goes to a Bombay prison for a period of time. He ends up fighting in Afghanistan. It's just, he acted in Bollywood. It's just an incredible story. And what I love about Gregory David Roberts' writing is that he has these beautiful observations about the human experience, and I think pretty much every chapter ends with almost like a poetic passage about the human experience of that chapter. And I absolutely adore this book. I know it's not everyone's cup of tea. I just really, I don't know. I can't even put into words how much I love this book, but it will, I think, probably forever be my favourite book. I'm not sure anything will top this for me. And I have waxed lyrical about it to pretty much anyone who will listen. The next one I've got is Diane Cook, The New Wilderness. So this was shortlisted for, longlisted. I think it was shortlisted for the Booker Prize 2020. If you can't already tell, that is where I get a lot of my reading recommendations. So this is set in the future, where an experiment has been set up where a group of people go to live off the land because the world has got so polluted that children are dying, and they want to know if people can survive off the land and have no access to the outside world and just completely revert back to tribalism, I suppose. And I think when I picked this up, I thought this was going to be very much a dystopian novel. But the interesting thing is that actually kind of comes back to a mother-daughter relationship and the nuances of what it means to be a parent, what it means to be a child, and how living in this tribal, very nature-driven existence filled with fear and hunger, pain, reward, lack of privacy, like so many things has affected that relationship. And it's a really well written book. I have a friend who read it and didn't enjoy it, but I think possibly because the dystopian novel part of it is oversold, particularly in the blurb, it becomes, I think you feel like you're going into for a true exploration of what this world might look like, when actually I think it becomes really more of an ode to motherhood and mother-daughter relationships. I thought it was a really beautiful book, so definitely recommend this one. The next one I think is second to last, or it might be the last one. I don't have the book because I lent it to my stepdad, but I loved this book. So this is another book that was longlisted for the Booker Prize 2020. This is How Much of These Hills is Gold by C. Pam Chung, a Chinese American author. It is written from the perspective of Chinese migrants. I can't remember the time it was set in, but it's written from the perspective of Chinese migrants trying to make their way in a very impoverished state, an impoverished world, in a racist, unfair, harsh world. And it's kind of fantastical, but I think if you let go of the sensibilities of life and lean into the fantastical nature of this story, it's beautifully written. The fantasy aspect of it is kind of stunning. There's a lot of Chinese folklore woven into American folklore, woven into this supposed reality that our characters are living in, and it's just really wonderful. There is a character in there who is most likely trans, and the challenges that presents as well in their lives when it was set. I'm just going to see if it tells us when it was set. It doesn't, but we know it was quite a long time ago. I don't think it does tell you when it was set, but it's certainly pre-technology, and it's just beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. I think it's in the gold era actually of mining gold, because there's a lot of mining terminology. I think the father was a miner, that kind of thing. It was a little while ago, obviously, that I read this. And the final 5-star read that I have is The Monk of Mocha, Mocha in Yemen. So this is by Dave Eggers, who I think also wrote The Circle, if anyone's read that. It's a true story of a young Yemeni American man raised in San Francisco who dreams of resurrecting the ancient art of Yemeni coffee, but finds himself trapped in Sana'a by civil war. This is a really bloody cool read. I don't even really have words for this. I think it taught me so much about Yemen, a country that I know next to nothing about. I had no idea that coffee kind of originates in Yemen, and it was kind of stolen from Yemen. We learn a lot about the realities and the harsh realities of life in Yemen these days, and of coffee farmers and how to make coffee farming fair. And it's a really interesting book in that I think it's actually non-fiction, but it's written in a fictitious way. And I just really enjoyed it. I think even if you're not interested in coffee, I think this is a really enjoyable read, and I highly recommend it. Really cool. And again, a lot like A Fort of Nine Towers and Kite Runner, I think it's really interesting to read these books that make current affairs really accessible to us, particularly those of us who find things like politics kind of challenging to get our heads around. I think putting them into a pseudo-fictional narrative or an actual fictional narrative can actually make these things a lot more accessible to those of us who are politics naive, I suppose. Right, we made it through. This is a long video, I'm so sorry, but I hope this was interesting to you guys. If you want to follow me on the StoryGraph, I will put my link in the description. I highly recommend using it. It's really cool. I mean, it just fulfills all my book nerd dreams. So yeah, absolutely recommend reading it. I would love to know your 5-star reads, so please leave those in the comments. I'm always up for more book recommendations, and I'd love to know what you're reading at the moment. Thanks as always for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you again next time. Bye guys.